I think I figured out the issue with the interfaces, so I've created a little video to walk you through the process of getting your interfaces up and working correctly. I think the whole problem lies with the cloning of the interfaces, and when I clone them, I reinitialize the MAC addresses because we don't want any MAC address conflicts. Well, what happens when I do that, when Linux comes up, it runs a service called udev, which basically is akin to Windows plug-and-play philosophy. Great service, wonderful. In this case, it's having problems because it sees those cards as new cards and refuses to give them the eth0 and eth1 device labels. We're going to work around that. I'll show you the problem. I've cloned my machine, and I have NAT and DHCP working on this cloned machine. So if you look at the settings of this machine, so if I go here, you can see that I have the bridge one, and then I host a host a host. So, I mean host only adapter. So it's exactly in the state where DHCP and NAT are working. I don't have DNS configured on this one because I never did save it from last night. So, but at this state, I don't think it would make a difference anyway. But at this state right here, it's pretty much at the state where most of us have been having some kind of issue. All right, how do we solve the problem? First, we'll start up the machine. Once again, as it starts up, if you watch the boot message, you'll notice that there are some problems right off the bat. You'll see error messages flying by about eth something or other having an issue. I'll see if I can catch it. It goes by pretty quick. Yeah, no. Yeah, it's moving fast. Okay, there you go. Device has a different MAC address than expected. Doesn't seem to be present. I mean, so it finds these new network cards, what it thinks is new network cards, and installs them. And then we have some problems from there. So let's let it boot up. I'll log in as student. Give it a second to pull its head together. You can see Network Manager is trying to work things out. You know what? I'm getting tired of Network Manager also, to be quite honest with you. So we'll SU in as root. We'll let Network Manager figure its head out here. I'll do an if config to show you that, sure enough, there's the problems that I'm hearing everybody else is having. So I've lost eth0 and eth1. Seems to be working on eth3. But right, it's not what I want. I want to fix this problem. So to do that, minimize that. I'm going to open Network Connections in Network Manager. And this is what I'm seeing. I can see them here, and a couple of people, I think Phil was talking about this last night, a few people were mentioning this. You can see them, but you don't know what to do with them. Well, what we're going to do with them is just delete them. So delete. It'll ask me for my password, my SLCC, and then I'm just going to delete all of them. Delete, delete, delete. Then I'm going to disable Network Manager because it just annoys me. Oops, I already have a terminal open with root. So the first thing we'll do is eth0init.d, capital N for Network Manager, then tab it out and stop, turn it off, and then we want to make sure it never comes back again. There's probably nothing wrong with Network Manager once you really spend the time to become intimate with it. I just don't like that there are 3 different ways to do this and they fight about it. Normally having multiple options is great, but in this case Network Manager and manually doing, in my opinion, is conflicting at times, and so I want to stop that conflict from happening and manually do it. So Network Manager off. Remember, Network Manager is case sensitive, so it has to be exactly like that. Right? That is how you turn it off, and then I want you to verify that it's off. So check config list grep capital N, because it's the only service that should be on that has a capital N in it. And as I can see here, Network Manager is off on all levels. Goodbye to Network Manager. The next thing we're going to do is cd into eth0 sysconfig network scripts. I'll do an ls here, and I can see that there's only right now one if CFG file configured. That's the loopback. I'm going to create two network interfaces in here, one pointing to eth0 and one pointing to eth1. If you type the command dmessage, by the way, so if you type dmessage, this is basically the boot up process that goes on, and dmessage is created and it finds all the devices on here. So if you're ever looking for something like a CD or a USB, or in this case NIC network devices, you want to run through dmessage and say, hey, what did the server see when it first booted up as far as hardware goes? And if I type that and then grep, this is the key, grep, and I don't know if it's going to be case sensitive or not. We'll just do case insensitive. And I grep for eth, what I should see, right, is that the system did find, right, it did find devices. And in this case, you can see it saw something here, and it saw these new ones coming up here, right? And this, and you notice udev right here, udev, and we'll take care of udev in a second. Udev came back and say, hey, I found this. But it's, you know, this is where it originally is coming up and seeing, right? So this is a good indication that we can use eth0 and eth1 for what we need to accomplish. We just have to tell udev to get past the issue that it thinks that they don't exist anymore. All right, so I'm going to use VI, so VI CFG, and I'm going to change it to eth0. Choose whatever editor you want to. It has to be a 0, not an O at the end, not a capital O. It's a 0 at the end of that file. I'll press enter, insert, and then I'll type a couple of basic arguments. So device equals eth, oops, not uppercase, eth0. Boot protocol is going to equal DHCP. And I want to make sure that it does boot up or start up when the system boots, so I put in on boot yes. For eth0, the one that's pointing out to the bridge network, that's all you need, just what you see right here. So I'll save that. That's all good. And then I will move eth0 to eth1. I'm just basically, I shouldn't say move, I should say copy, apologize, not move. Copy, don't do that. Copy that to that, press enter, and now edit eth1. So we'll change the device name, replace that with a 1, replace this with static, and we'll add a couple of other parameters. So IP ADDR equals 10.100.0.254. Net mask equals 255.255.255.0. Okay, if you need to, just pause the video at any time and make your file look exactly like that. So this is the eth1 file. And that's all we need for right now. We just need to tell it it's static, the device name is eth1, here's its IP address, here's its mask, and yes, I want it to boot. You can put lots of other things in here, but that's good enough for us for right now. Keep it basic because we have lots of fun things to do, and this is just going to hamper us. Okay, next thing we have to do is delete a file under udev that contains all this, you know, confusing information for udev. And so what we'll do is cd into eth0 udev rules. We'll do an ls here, and we see a couple of different rule files in here, and what we want to do is delete this one right here. But before we delete it, we'll cat it. So cat 70 tab net tab. And as you can see, there's lots of information in here about different interfaces. So there's 0, there's 1, there's 2, there's 3, there's 4. And this is where the problem is between Network Manager and this. This is where the problem lies. So we want to delete this so that when the system reboots, it doesn't have any issues with MAC addresses and problems. It sees it as a different device. So we will type remove 70 persistent N tab. Remove that file, and we say yes. Okay, and that file is gone. The other thing we want to do before we reboot the system, if you have DHCP enabled, and if you don't, you can pretty much just reboot here, watch the video on enabling DHCP and NAT and all that good stuff and get it configured. The system should come back, right? Find the interfaces, and life should be wonderful. As far as they should show up as 0 and 1 in the correct order. But if you have DHCP enabled like I do right now, then the system will probably come back and throw an error message when you try to start DHCP because it may have an issue with it. So what we'll do is edit that right now to make sure that that doesn't happen. So we'll cd into eth0, where do I go, sysconfig, and then I'll vi dhcpd. And here, and I'm not sure why mine says this, but it does, I'm going to change that to replace it with a 1. So I want that DHCP server to listen on eth1. That's the one pointing to the XP box, the LAN. Remember, eth0 points to the internet or the bridged. So that's good. We'll save that. Alrighty, now because these are new devices, right? This is not, you basically just, shook UDev's world up here. You can't just restart networking from this point. You have to do a reboot so that it can go through the whole process of finding these supposedly new network cards. So I'll type reboot, and I'll pause the video here and then start it up once we get going again. Okay, so actually I figured let me just watch it as it boots up. This is the boot up process going through right now, and what we should see, and we do see, is that it's finding the network cards, and here it comes up. It says, hey, I found eth0, and I'm going to see if I can apply an address to eth0. It says done, and it says, hey, I found eth1, done. That is what we all hope to see. And I think you will. I've gone through it a couple times and looked at it a couple different ways, and this seems to solve the problem. So it should be the same for everybody else. Okay, in the student CSIS. Alrighty. Open up a terminal. We're going to SU just in case we need to fix anything, because you never know. We'll do an if config here. And sure enough, I see 0, and it's getting a bridged mode address, and I see 1 just like I want to, and it's getting the 10.4, I'm sorry, the 10.0, the 10.100.0.254 address. There you go. So that looks good, and the other thing we want to check is to make sure, once again, if you had DHCP configured, you want to make sure that it's running and life is good for that. And it is running, life is good. So we should have no problems, and as a matter of fact, we can check DHCP. So I'll less DHCP var log DHCP. I'll scroll down the bottom, and as we can see, it's already wrote an address. Right, so it's already wrote an address out. It's listening on 1. It wrote an address out on that interface. Well, actually, I don't think it doesn't show it wrote an address out just yet, so it probably the client already has an address, but it is showing that it's listening and sending out addresses on an interface. I have my XP box up, didn't have to do anything with that, so let me get that going. And what I'll do is IP config / release just to test it, get rid of it, and then renew. Okay, I'm getting an address. Last thing I have to check is NAT still working? And I look, and sure enough, NAT is still working. Now, probably DNS is not, because I don't think I have it configured in this snapshot, but that really shouldn't matter. once again, if for some reason you don't have you can just, install the DHCP and get it working from the previous video. If NAT should be a problem, and it shouldn't be, because like I said, I've gone through this a couple times looking at it in different ways, and this one consistently has worked for me. But if NAT's a problem, you can go to administrative, go to firewall, and work through it that way. But I don't think you shouldn't have to do this, but you can remember what we did last night. I'll cancel out of this. Quit. Alrighty. Once you're done with this, life is great. We'll open up a terminal. I will power it off at this point. Let it go through its shutdown process. And then I'll take a snapshot. Right? Key is take a snapshot before you do this, take a snapshot after you do this. Once you're happy with it, and you should have it looking exactly like this, then take a snapshot. That's your base for the rest of the class. Make sure you have that snapshot available at all times. Alrighty, well, hopefully this solves all your problems. Take your time configuring it, work through, look at your logs if you have any problems to see if maybe you didn't type something correctly. And if you have any issues, let me know and we'll discuss it in tomorrow night's class. All right, thanks everybody. I'll talk to you tomorrow.